I am recording.
All right, I'm going to give the countdown to clap. So, 3, 2, 1. Hello, and welcome to this episode of the Alien Familiar RPG Podcast. I'm Clayton.
I'm the sweatiest man alive, Kyle Perkins.
I'm the second sweatiest man alive, Jordan.
Before we get started, you can find show notes and more at alienfamiliar.com. You can email us at alienfamiliarmedia@gmail.com. We're on Facebook at facebook.com/alienfamiliarmedia. If you would like to help us out with hosting the show, you can do so at patreon.com/alienfamiliarmedia. If you enjoy our content and would like to help us out, any help you would be able to give us would be greatly appreciated. Thank you for joining us. Today we are going to be talking about bad behaviors of GMs and how to change them. This is the third in a series that we have been doing. The first two parts in this series, we talked about bad behaviors of players. This time we're going to be turning the spotlight onto ourselves as game masters. And, I'm going to be turning my spotlight onto myself as a game master and also talking about other things I've seen in game masters. But for the most part, I'm going to be talking about things that I recognize I do that's shitty and I'm trying to change, but damn, change is hard.
Sure is.
So I'm going to just start off on one of the things that I struggle with the most, and that is this delicate balance between being an autocrat at the table and just not running the table, not have any control over the table. I feel like there's two extremes there that sometimes I fall into each extreme during a particular session, but also I have been worse at one and then the other at different times in my gaming career. What I mean by being an autocrat at the table is being one of those very strict people who keeps everybody locked onto the task at hand, doesn't enjoy or doesn't permit any side conversations, doesn't permit any, it might even extend as far as not allowing any side adventures going on. The most extreme version of this would be railroading, a railroading GM. Then the opposite end of that spectrum, I would consider not running the table at all, allowing your players to do literally anything at the table, and that includes not playing the game for hours and hours on end.
If I could elaborate on that a little bit from my own experience on the back end of the DM screen, I think about it as like kind of three dimensions. Each one of them are sort of their own spectrum. And there was two of them that you kind of had together. It's the real world table activity, how much engagement there is in the game or distraction. Then there is how tightly you force people to adhere to your story or let them go do whatever. And then I think there's another dimension that overlays on top of that, which is sort of adherence to the rules, like that weird balance between rules as written and rule of cool, as they say. So those are things that I'm always kind of trying to figure out how to balance when I'm running and watching when I'm playing as well. Does that contribute anything?
Yeah, and thank you for breaking it down even further. I totally agree that whenever you're talking about the way that the players are playing the game and whenever the players are sitting around the table, those two different dimensions of interaction, those should be totally separate. But I know that I kind of lump them in together whenever I look at my own flaws as a game master.
Well, the player engagement at the table is kind of the prerequisite for anything else to happen, obviously. If no one's there, then nothing's going on. But yeah, I do think that's an independent thing from how tightly the player characters adhere to the story as expected. Yeah. So what are you doing to try to balance that, Clayton?
Well, when I realize that I'm doing it, I take a breath. Right now, I recognize that I'm on the autocratic end of that spectrum. I'm pretty controlling. I am definitely on the rules as written side of the rule of against rule of cool. I definitely fall more on rules as written. I whenever it comes to players sitting around just kind of bullshitting at the table, in that dimension, I feel like I'm more on the end of not speaking up, allowing players to sit around the table and just talk about anything and everything that is not the game. And I feel like with that particular dimension, I could use a little bit more authoritarianism at my table, because I don't want us to get around the table and sit and play the game and all of the time be not actually playing the game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, agreed. So what's the magic trick to move a little from column A into column B, do you think? It sounds like you've got a really you have a frustrating time, like, personally running games. Like, the way that you articulate it, I'm surprised that you do it.
Yes, I do get very, very frustrated. Not just at the players, but all, like, I get frustrated more with myself than with the players. Whenever you experience me getting frustrated, more of that is inwardly focused, because I can feel that I am getting frustrated by something that is just a game. I shouldn't be having this reaction. Why can't I just chill the hell down? Mm-hmm. And that kind of feeds into this cycle of where I start to get a little bit annoyed, and I realize I'm getting annoyed, so I get annoyed at myself for getting annoyed, and I don't know where to stop. Something that I have tried to do in the relatively recent past is I'll call for a break. I'll call, okay, I've got to go to the bathroom. That's always the perfect excuse to get away from the table whenever you need to take a moment and collect yourself. Take a few minutes, go into the bathroom, and you don't even have to do anything related to the toilet. Just stand at the sink and I look at myself in the mirror, and I do this little ritual of deep breathing and relaxation techniques, of imagining the stress in my body clearing out. And I've been finding that actually works for helping me to get back into not control of the table, but self-control.
Mm-hmm. You're definitely not alone in taking this shit way too fucking seriously. That's me all the damn time. And you know what? With the fucking, like, I think with the COVID shit and, like, just being boxed in the house all the time, this is probably everybody. I think that, like, the minuscule shit seems so magnified, and it's weird because there's, like, really horrible shit going on in the world. People are out of work, people are fucking dying, like, shit's spreading everywhere, like, it's a terrible time. And you'd think that, in contrast, some silly ass shit like a D&D game would seem not that big of a deal, but when it's like the only fucking, like, release, when something's not quite right there, I'm like, fuck, rage quit, I'm gonna fucking throw my laptop through the TV, you know, like, it's bizarre, like, there's just so much stress, and I think it's much worse under these circumstances. And we can't read each other, you know? Like, just having voices to go on makes this all so much more difficult to balance.
Yeah, if we're going to bring the current state of health and safety into this discussion, it makes the already challenging task of DMing at least 100% more difficult, if not more, because you can't read people. And you have to, and I think one of the bad traits of a DM is kind of railroading forward whatever you're doing, whatever your story is, whatever your idea of how the session should go, ramrodding that through, it's a bad DM trait, not reading your players. And it's currently playing remote games through Roll20 or through Discord or however you're doing it. Smoke signals. It's really, really difficult.
At least you're inspired, Clayton. At least you're like, or if not inspired, willing to fucking put in the work. I think I fail as a DM at least as much as you do, but in like completely different ways. Maybe not opposite ways, but like I have a hard time giving a fuck for extended periods of time, and I like the game I made. That's kind of the only thing I run. I should probably run some other stuff again because it's been too long, and that one dimension we were talking about of like rule of cool versus rules as written, that's totally hinging on what game system you're playing to start with, what's built in to be allowed or whatever. But as far as letting players do stuff, I always err on the side of just sandbox away. But I get bored with the games that I run so easily, and maybe that's my fault. Maybe I don't have enough like scripted shit for people to do or whatever. I've got a lot of like sort of story booby trap kind of things that are in my mind in a given setting, that if they go to X then Y will happen, that kind of shit. But like I try not to have that, doomsday clock kind of impetus for anyone to do anything unless there's a really good reason to have that. But yeah, maybe I don't know how to work on that. How do you give a fuck more?
Well, I've struggled with that very issue. Throughout the majority of my game mastering career, most of my games that have gone to completion have been by design shorter games. Like in college, I had the time constraint of, okay, we know how many weeks are, well, at the time we were on the quarter system. We know there's 10 weeks in a quarter, but midterms and finals, we're not going to be able to game those weeks. So realistically, I have 8 sessions to do either an entire campaign or to do one campaign arc. And having that into smaller chunks allows, I feel like, a better, it makes it easier to be able to prevent yourself from getting that to that point where you just don't care. Because whenever I try to do very long-term campaigns or campaigns that don't have a planned time frame in which they're going to end, all of my games just fizzle out because I don't have that focus. I don't have this idea of, okay, I need to get this wrapped up in this amount of time, and the structure of the story needs to fit within this time frame. Whenever I don't have that structure, I run into that exact same issue that you're talking about, Jordan. Mm-hmm. I get apathetic because there comes a point where I'm not really preparing because more often than not, the reason why I become apathetic for a campaign is because I've had another campaign idea that I want to run. That's usually the culprit for why I lose enthusiasm for a particular campaign.
Same here, and it's kind of the same with characters a lot of times too, unless I really get hooked on something. Like, I'll have an idea for a story and be like, all right, let's give it a shot, and then you get like 3, 4, 5 sessions into it and the experiment's just not going the way you wanted. I'm just like, fuck. I was telling Kyle the other day, I think I'm just gonna do like one shots for a while, or like, real short little 2 or 3 session things at most, just to kind of like, I don't know, have sort of low pressure stuff and just, run a bunch of different experiments, see if anything really grabs me. I guess if any of those go really well, you can always, extend it further, but fuck, I just feel like I've been really forcing that lately.
Gotta get your groove back, man.
I don't know, dude. It's hard. There's not a lot of groove stuck in this same goddamn apartment on this same fucking couch with this same fucking dog staring at me every fucking day.
I was just gonna say, I'd take Merlin for a while.
No, he's the only person I have to talk to.
And Jordan, you're talking about burnout.
Mhm.
And that's the danger of sticking with one thing for a long time, and you don't have that change and variety. And this is not advice for just a game. This is for anything that you are doing, especially now when we're on lockdown from COVID. You need things to break up the monotony. You need things to break up the pattern that you settle yourself into. And yes, doing one-shots are absolutely great for that. Doing short little campaigns are absolutely great for that, because you get to try out different flavors, and the variety is the spice of life, and you need that spice in order to keep yourself motivated to stick with this hobby, or else you get into a point where everything is the same, everything just gets bland. And as a game master, if you come at it from the perspective that everything is just kind of the same, I'm just creating a session for the night, and I'm just putting out just what I need to get through the night, eventually that lack of enthusiasm is going to transfer over to the players, and the game is just going to die.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. And I think I've mentioned this before, but like, I'm seriously thinking about like using webcams more. I did not realize how much of what I get out of running a game is on the faces of the players. And without that, like, the whole experience is just empty to me. Like, I try to, like, when I'm running a game, I try to, like, tweak things in, like, a feedback loop kind of way. See what works, tone back what doesn't, whatever. Like, play to what people are enjoying. And if I can't see that spark in somebody's eye, it just seems completely fucking dead and literally phoned in.
In the Apocalyptia game I'm running, it's the only online game I've done or am doing that we're all using webcams. Everybody was pretty gung-ho about it, actually. And watching one of my players, watching the shock on his face when they entered this like smoker compound. The game is set in like a Waterworld-esque post-apocalyptic flooded planet, and they entered this floating complex, and they were fighting some nasty dudes, and they go into a room and they catch some people unawares, and they're sleeping underneath this like pile of blankets. They see some bodies, and so they just hose bullets into the pile of bodies. Makes it easy, and then they pull the blankets off to check for loot, and they ended up killing a young teenager. And watching one of my players go, "Oh shit," and like see his crestfallen face, I live for that. I live for that shit. But I would recommend trying webcams. I know this is not on topic right now, but it's working pretty well. And it goes back into being able to read your players and being able to, tweak that game based on the feedback you're getting. So I guess it's still somewhat on topic.
Yeah, for sure. The bad DM trait is the completely socially blind person that just ramrods whatever they've got set up, and there is no feedback loop. Like the whole thing, like when you boil it down, is a conversation, right? And like any conversation, if you can't bounce that ball back and forth and somebody just lets it drop, then it's just awkward thud silence, and that has its own representation at the game table as well. But yeah, thud.
So if you realize that you're doing that, do you guys have any advice on, like, if you realize that you are being one of those people who is, or if you're in a game with somebody who is doing the thing where they're not paying attention to the players, how do you handle that? Like, whenever I'm a game master, I try to measure the amount of time that I spend speaking. I try to make sure that I am not completely monopolizing the amount of words that are being said in the conversation. But it's hard as a DM because the DM is expected to speak as much or more than all of the other players combined most of the time. Except in instances where you are able to foster a situation where the player characters start talking amongst themselves, which in my experience doesn't happen as much as what we see in a lot of the media about like D&D players and stuff.
Mm-hmm. I've got thoughts. Kyle, do you want to take a stab at it first?
No, you go ahead.
Okay. Though I've run a lot of games over the years, I've definitely played way more. And like I was saying, it's a little bit the opposite problem for me because I'm so eager to just like give open playground to players. But like for me, the fun of being a player is exercising that agency that you have in weird ways, inventive ways. And even if it fucks up, it's cool to have been given the opportunity to take a stab at it. And so I'm constantly, like maybe neurotically, trying to think about what it is like to be playing this game that I'm running. And what would I want the DM to say? Not to just hand out, empty victories and stuff, but like, let me have a shot at stuff, and, the dice fall where they may and whatever, but like, I really try to stop myself from saying no to anything if there's any sort of reasonable way that something can be pulled off. Like, maybe I'll tweak it and say, well, a little bit more like this, that would probably work, blah, 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 give suggestions, and, it's system relevant and whatever. But, like, I try to avoid a hard no if I can help it, unless whatever the person's saying is just, like, flatly impossible or ridiculous. Does that add up?
Yeah. And that's something I try to do as well. I try to, whenever a player says that they want to do something that I don't feel would be possible, I try to explain why that's not going to, like, what all the obstacles are that might prevent that from happening. So for instance, the player is wanting to, has a character who is going to who needs to get across a chasm, and they say, I'm going to try to leap across. How wide is it? And so I would explain how wide it is. I would explain, like, well, but your side is a little bit lower, so it's going to make it even more difficult. Let's see, what's the rules for that? You can jump this far. What type of a roll would you need in order to conceivably leap that distance? And just kind of explain and pile on all of the modifiers that would come into play in order to accomplish something. And my intention with doing that is to get the player to realize this is what I'm seeing through my character's eyes. These are all the obstacles that I'm seeing, because I feel like a lot of times the game master is often just giving a more bird's eye view of what is going on in the world, what the player characters are seeing. And there's a lot of information that is happening in the game master's mind's eye that the player characters are just not getting, because it would be impossible for me to explain everything that I can see when I close my eyes and imagine a scene and convey that to the players.
Yeah, the DM's definitely the ultimate source of truth for what is and what is not the case in the world. That's why when somebody comes to me with something that won't work out because of how I'm envisioning it, I try to kick back an alternative idea that's close to what they're doing but would work given the circumstances. But yeah, like you were saying, at least, break it down, in some kind of reasonable explanation of what the problem is there.
Both of those ways of responding to that player that you both just described, presenting a similar alternative or breaking down why what they're trying to do is really difficult, if not impossible, because it would take this step and that step and that step and that step. You're giving the player a sort of little brainstorming session about what they could do, and that's great. A really bad way of doing it is to just blatantly shut them down with a no and not explain why or alternatives, or you could try this first step to work towards doing that thing, but you can't just do that thing. I've had some experiences with DMs who just, not necessarily douchily, but like straight up just say, no, that won't work. Okay, well, what will? What am I, how am I thinking incorrectly here? I hate that.
Another thing that I want to bring up is not taking shit personally as a DM. Like, it's easy to make the game competitive in a way that I don't think it should be. Because ultimately, if you wanted to be a total tyrant as a DM, you could, hand out brain aneurysms and it's case closed. Like, the whole thing is, a mutually consensual invention of, wouldn't it be cool if, and, if a player comes up with something, or, if some shit's going away that the DM doesn't like, oh, you killed my fucking pet NPC, I had plans for that guy, whatever, no, release it. It doesn't matter. You can make up more shit. There are other monsters. There are other NPCs. There is no way to actually make D&D a competitive game like that. It's not built for that. But I think it's really easy when we're talking about like creative endeavors like this, to have so much ego wrapped up in your vision for the creation that, it undermines itself. You can't force a story with a bunch of other people contributing to be exactly what you wanted it to be.
And I think a big part of correcting that, whenever you get to a point where, like, I get to the point where I get frustrated, and like I said, taking a moment to relax. A question I ask myself is, how much fun are the players having, and how can I contribute to that? How can I take what they've given me and give them more of what they want? Mm-hmm. And a lot of times the players say that they want they want victory after victory. They want to be able to defeat every challenge. I'm also on the end of the spectrum where I tend to give my players too many obstacles, too many problems where they do get victories, but the victories come at a cost. I do that way too much. I don't allow the players to have a pure victory, but I also feel that I worry about being on either end of this spectrum, where either I allow the players to have a victory that came too easy and therefore they don't really enjoy, versus having either a straight up failure or a Pyrrhic victory where it costs so much that they might as well have not even attempted whatever they were doing to begin with because the cost was too high. That's a middle ground that I am constantly seeking, that I've seen many times, either as myself as the game master or other people as the game masters, kind of slip one way or the other too far on that spectrum. Mm-hmm. And I feel like a lot of times the answer to keeping it from being too far one way or the other is to ask yourself, are the players having fun? How can I make them have more fun? While we are doing all of our gaming online right now, I literally have a Post-it note attached to my monitor just below my notes on the computer. Like, it covers up the logo for my monitor that says, "Are the players having fun?" I'm looking at it and pointing at it right now as I'm describing this. So it's something that I want to have a constant reminder for. And whenever we go back to doing games face to face again, God, I can't wait for that to happen. I intend to have a similar post-it note either on a DM screen or on my laptop if I'm using that for notes. I intend to have a physical reminder there to let me know this is the way.
Aw, you're like Homer Simpson at the nuclear plant. Do it for her.
Clayton, what you're describing is the art of game design. I've read a little bit of the academic research that's out there on game design and like psychology, and I had this book that was like specifically about video game design and like a little bit of role-playing game design stuff mixed in there too. And they kept talking about how like the only way that you can really quantify fun from an individual perspective is that it's got to be a variable reward schedule in the same way that like, you know, behaviorist stuff works. That if you just keep getting those easy victories, you get bored. And if it's way too damn difficult, it's just not fucking worth it, and you're going to go to something else. What people call fun is when they have a series of challenges of variable difficulty and variable reward for their victory. That's what keeps people coming back, that constantly seeking, how's it going to work out this time? You know, blah, blah, blah. So, yeah, you just got to keep mixing it up, apparently. That's what the people who call themselves academics that write about these things seem to say anyway.
It brings up an interesting idea. Why is it so hard to reward our players? Why can't we just... They've done something good. Give them a treat. Give them a victory. Give them something. It's like we're always worried about this arms race between the players getting too much and having too much, you know, victory, and also trying to like craft a story where there are hardships and they have to earn what they've accomplished over a series of hardships. Why don't we want to give players things? Why don't we want to let them make them have fun? I'm sweating. I'm so sweaty. Did that make any sense? I'm so hot right now.
I've been thinking about that a lot lately. I've been wanting to run 5th edition, and I have not gotten a chance to run a 5e game so far. It's been out for years now, and I still haven't. But I've been thinking, like, what if I just ran a fucking, like, level 15 starting, like, multi-dimensional, like, maybe Spelljammer or something, like, epic like that, but just one of those, like, 4th power tier level games. And just fucking went hog wild, you know, went through all the, like, super high CR monsters that you never see and all that kind of shit. Like, D&D doesn't really top out, like, they're, you know, the upper tier dragons or Terrask or whatever kind of shit. But you can always throw more stuff and you can always make up more things. And, you know, I don't know, I think it'd be fun to just go, you know, dial everything up to 11, say hell with the fucking doling out little common magic items and shit.
So kind of tangentially related to that, like, it sounds like a piece of advice there is like, if you see something that you haven't been doing or something that you want to try, go at it full bore. With the Eberron campaign that we are all playing in, I made a decision that I was going to play a certain style that is way different than what I normally run. And here is how, in this game, I just threw it out there for you guys to do, and there's not a damn thing I can do about it at this point. I gave your characters the amount of wealth that you should have. Your characters are what, level 4 now? Mm-hmm. I gave your characters the amount of wealth that you should have at approximately level 9 or 10. Mm-hmm. And right now I am part of my learning and growing is I let you have that, and now I am not going to take it away from you. I am going to deal with the consequences of doing a Monty Hall game because I'm always stingy with wealth, with magic items.
God damn, you are. Holy shit. I think you're the stingiest DM I've ever played with, Clayton.
Wealth and loot and stuff like that, that is always an afterthought whenever I write any sort of a scenario. I get done with writing it and I don't do the loot. I don't normally think about doing loot until the players ask me, okay, what did they have? Well, shit, I didn't figure that out. I didn't roll on any tables. I have this vague idea of wealth by level, but I don't know how much you guys have. It's something that I struggle with constantly, and this time I decided this Eberron campaign, I'm going to fix that problem of mine. That was my goal. I'm going to fix this one problem.
Are you surprised at how it's worked out so far?
No, I'm not at all surprised that you have a 25 AC. And it's going to be...
Almost very little of that has anything to do with that money. Like maybe +3's worth of that has to do with that money.
Clayton, are you surprised that I've spent literally not a dime of it?
I wouldn't say I'm surprised. I do think I might give you some suggestions of some things that might hit your character out a little bit more, because I know that's an area that not every player is interested in, is going through the books and figuring out all the nifty little gadgets and stuff that you can get to completely min-max your character. I feel like that's another thing that I need to work on is balancing out that aspect of the game where different players have different investments in the different levels of minutia for the game. Because some players just don't care about any of the minutia. And that's one of the ways in which I'm an autocratic DM, is I often focus on that minutia. And I'm trying real hard to let go of that.
The first thing that I started thinking when I had all that money and started going through the Dungeon Master's Guide was, what kinds of cool shit can this open up for my character to be able to do? And if you had just straight up said, like, nothing with damage bonuses, nothing with armor bonuses, I still would have been fine grabbing all the weird little wondrous items and stuff, doing neat shit with that. I haven't even got to use my fucking pair of immovable rods yet. I'm fucking thrilled the first chance I get to start climbing my infinite ladder. There's just so many cool things. I mean, that fucking Helm of Comprehend Languages tonight, that was awesome. I had no idea I was gonna come across something like that, but like, handing out money is just handing out options for players to do more things, and I don't think, I think you're doing the right thing. Shouldn't be afraid of that.
The next thing I need to do, now that I've given you a lot of money, is I need to just start throwing out weird magic items. Just scour the internet for the weirdest magical items that I can find and put those into the game. Because that's a way in which most of my games end up being bland, is that they don't have the clutch magic item that has this weird ability that you can that in this one instance is just going to completely turn the encounter around.
Mm-hmm. Kyle, how do you suck at being a DM?
I'm very guilty of not planning enough in between sessions.
I would say I'm guilty of planning a little bit too much between certain sessions. I don't do it all the time, but whenever I design an adventure, I over design. So, Kyle, I know you run off the cuff a lot. Is that by design, or is that by just not doing the prep? Because I get the feeling that you do a lot of prep for your campaigns, but it also feels like there's an awful lot of the stuff that you have in your games that is made up on the spot. So what would you say your proportions of that are?
I think it has more to do with what I plan. So I really enjoy planning, and I think I'm very good at planning macro scale things, big picture things, world design, factions, the overall scope of the game, and where and how a big plot will drag players along towards a vague destination, but it's the small twists and turns along the way. It's especially things like encounters. It's the minutia that really just I have a bad taste for. And, for example, I enjoy looking up enemies and finding cool things in an encounter to throw at players, but I'm not going to sit there and run some practice combat by myself in order to see if those creatures actually will present a fun challenge. It's definitely something I'm working on, but it's I guess it's also a lot of fun. I do have a lot of fun giving that illusion that what the players are doing was planned all along, even though it was completely made up on the spot. And when it works out, there's like nothing more satisfying. But I am always, as a consequence, in my own head and worried that the players are over there thinking, this fucking poser, we know what he's doing. This sucks. This is so boring. Does that make sense?
Yeah, imposter syndrome is a very real fear and constant thought in the back of the game master's mind, where you're worried about being found out for not being the type of person that the players expect of you or that other people expect of you. I constantly feel like as I'm playing the game, like I'm not really that good. I'm terrible at this. I'm just barely managing to hold everybody's attention. Every time a player gets exasperated, I really take that hard internally. Hearing a player get frustrated with, like if I've created something on the fly and if I feel like the players identify that thing was made on the fly, it just brings the entire thing down on me. I feel like I'm not doing a real job of being a game master.
I feel like a garbage DM all the time. I don't think I've hardly ever really felt like I've done a good job at it. I'm not sure why I keep doing it. I prefer to like fuck with system rules and things like that. One thing, Kyle, going back to what you were talking about, and this is like very generalizable as advice, I guess. I think it's super easy to like for your eyes to be bigger than your stomach, I guess is the way that you'd say it. Like getting really ambitious, and then it comes to like where you actually have to fucking manage all this shit on a week by week basis that you've, dreamt up and accumulated over the course of however long. Like that's why I try to generally run like pretty simple, like small scale kinds of games, because it just gets out of hand so quick, and like it's so easy to sit around and think up like, oh, wouldn't it be cool if this happened, and wouldn't this NPC be cool, and this country sounds awesome, let's do stuff there. But then when you put it all together, and then you've got certain players are interested in this piece, and other players are interested in this other piece, and you've got, all these different things moving, and it just becomes this like super stressful, monstrous thing to try to juggle and keep it all coherent as, a representation of a living, breathing world. I don't know. Am I rambling yet?
No, it's impossible to please all of the people all of the time. And I think that it's a noble goal to strive for, but not only should you not get down on yourself if you fail, I'm not sure if you should try as a DM. I think it's more worthy to try to get people to do similar things, to create fewer groups. And this is something else that I know I'm not good at. And I was especially guilty of it, a few games ago, maybe the Eclipse Phase game we ran. Letting the players constantly split the party and do their own things because I want them to have fun. I want them to be able to do their own stuff. I want to craft this, like, Pulp Fiction style story where all of these different elements suddenly come together at the end of the session in this amazing climactic moment. And again, when it works, it's cool as hell. But It's infrequent. It's not reliable. I should not rely on that, and neither should you.
I was trying to make a point mostly about complexity, not necessarily about like trying to please everybody, which that's another thing as well. But like just trying not to bite off more than you can chew, and more than probably is necessary. This is one of those things we've talked about before, like over preparing for your games. That's a pretty common DM mistake, but we've probably talked that one to death. How do I suck as being a DM, guys? We beat up on you guys pretty good, and I promise whatever you say to me is nowhere near as bad as I rip my own guts out after every session. So how do I fuck up?
Before we get into that, I just want to add, like, as far as maintaining this ever expanding scope of a game that is growing and growing and growing throughout the entire length of play, an advice I would give for managing that is make sure that you have time immediately after the session to jot down notes, and you actually do jot down notes, especially after the game, but also during the game. Write down, just if you make up a new NPC, make sure you write that character down. Put their name and something to do with what the players are doing, because you are not going to remember that, and you are going to be asked who this player or who this NPC was, and you're not going to know 2, 3, 4, 5 sessions down the line. So I think the best way to mitigate having this campaign that is sprawling out of control is to write shit down, and that is more through discipline than through skill.
Even if something seems unimportant, if it happened, make a note of it, and your players are going to think you're a goddamn superhero for bringing back that tiny instance where the cleric threw a coin into a well and then you bring that back in some cool way. You know, like, stuff like that, even if it seems small. Write it down. Write it down. Do it. Take notes on our podcast episodes. Have a binder filled with Alien Familiar podcast episode notes. Count the number of times I make a bad joke. Count the number of times. Do it. Jordan.
Yo.
I have an example from your most recent game that you quit on like a quitter. I was having fun. I think most people were. I was enjoying that game. But every time you were just like, this sucks. Nobody likes this game. I don't like this game. Maybe that was the most important bit, that you didn't like the game. You quit. You're a quitter. You quit out on it. And that's a bummer. Mind you, I probably shouldn't have been in so many games every week, but that's neither here nor there.
Yeah, I think, Kyle, you hit on a prime sin that, Jordan, you do commit sometimes, that every game master needs to be wary of, is telling your players that you're not feeling it. I feel like it's okay if you have an off night, but if you are telling your players, man, I just don't like this game, that's going to kill the enthusiasm. Even worse if you continue to trudge on in the game after that. The tact I use, and I mean, if you guys disagree with this tact, please let me know, because this is what I've been doing in the past, is if I get to the point where I am actually done with the game, I will tell the players, okay, in X number of sessions, this game is going to end. And that gives me a time limit to look forward to, that I'm not going to have to play this game anymore. And it also gives me focus of, okay, I only have to deal with it for this much longer, and I know what I have to do in order to wrap the game up. I feel like it's a sin for a game master to just end a game when they're not feeling it. If it's at all possible, try to have some sort of a wrap up, even if it's just a small arc that you wrap up. Just kind of give the players a sense of completion for the end of the campaign, and then you can just cut it off there mercifully.
So you're telling me you want me to run a final session of that game, Clayton?
Well, in this particular instance, no, because I'm the type of player that if I haven't played in a game in several weeks on end, I'm done with the game myself.
Yep. That's one of the things, is that when a couple of random things come up in a row, and then it's like, well, it's kind of fucked anyhow. And also, I'm bad about getting on that, like, in the same way that we were talking about, like, what is fun for the player. The variable reward schedule also happens to me as a DM, so I have a good session. Be like, oh yeah, cool, I can keep doing this, whatever. And then the next one's garbage. And then I'm like, fuck, you know? I just keep, like, I don't know, chasing the dragon or something.
Full disclosure, the session we did earlier tonight, we did our session before we recorded this session, or this podcast. The beginning of the session, I felt was absolutely terrible. I felt like nothing was clicking. It was going to be a bad session. And I took a break and I redoubled my efforts to try to make it a fun session. And like, I felt like the session ended in a positive way. I feel like I ended the session with the players at least engaged in what was going on, and with their appetites whetted a little bit for the next session.
Yep.
I remember losing confidence a lot in the Wanderers game. Not sure where I was going with that statement, but it just brought me back.
Well, confidence is one of the eternal struggles as being a game master. It goes back to the feeling of being an imposter. I'm not good enough to do this. If you have a bad session, that is what is going to be going through your mind. If you have a lackluster session, things don't go right. If you want to stick in the hobby, you've got to tackle that horse again and just come back and try to come back with the attitude that this next one is going to be better. If you allow if you allow yourself to be bogged down by a string of lackluster sessions, I think mix it up somehow. Do something that is in some way drastically different to revitalize yourself in whatever you are running. If I'm feeling like this, I try to do some sort of a cross-genre type of adventure or session, just to break things up and to just give it that shot in the arm to hopefully get some enthusiasm back, not only for myself, but hopefully in the players as well.
I think I'm going to start approaching games like TV shows. Like, do a pilot one shot. If I'm feeling it and other people are feeling it, then do that, like, tentative first season, like 6 episodes kind of deal. And then after that, see where it goes from there. And, when ratings start dropping, then, okay, not going to be renewed for the next season, but we'll finish this season up and never commit to, some crazy ass, like, 30 sessions or something like that. Just let it grow organically if it's going to, and let it die gracefully if it won't.
I think that's the perfect analogy.
What else? Is there any other way that we suck we haven't covered?
Well, we're sitting at about the hour mark.
And I'm sitting in a stew of my own human juices.
Juicy.
So let's move on to geek things. I have got just one that I want to go over. A buddy of mine is doing a Kickstarter for D&D 5th edition character cards. These are cards made on using wood templates, and these cards are designed for helping new players and maybe players who are just forgetful keep track of things like spells and class abilities. An example of one of these cards is each card is I'm not sure of the dimensions. I only have a picture, but this wooden card is probably about half or a quarter, the size of half or a quarter sheet of paper, and there are slots built into it for different things. For example, if you're playing a bard, you have a spot where you can put your inspiration die. You have the die physically sitting in this slot so that whenever you need to give that out, you hand it to another player. There's also slots for spell slots. So if you're a bard and you have 3 first level spells, you put a die in there with 3 showing, and then whenever you cast a spell that's in that spell slot, you just roll the number down to the next lower so that you can keep track of how many different spells you might have, or whether or not you've used certain abilities. This Kickstarter is going on right now. It has currently funded, and it is scheduled to end on July 14th. So if you're listening to this and you are interested, you can go ahead and back it. It's already kickstarted. The guy it's being run by Hrothgar's Horde. I'll have a link in the show notes for it. But the guy who runs it, he also has an Etsy shop that he sells other things, other woodworking things that he has done that it's all geek related. He'll make like clocks with engravings or pictures and stuff on it of different geek things. Like he's got some with like Lord of the Rings stuff, Game of Thrones things, Doctor Who. So if after the Kickstarter is over, these items will still be available through his Etsy shop, and I will also put a link to that in the show notes as well.
I'll go. I got a new laptop that I would recommend to anybody looking for new laptops. It's a Lenovo IdeaPad 5. I specifically got the one with the AMD processor, the new 4500U processor. I love this thing. I'm still kind of getting used to some of the stuff, but like, it's got this really nice texture to it. It's super lightweight, 15-inch screen. The keyboard is the best keyboard I've ever had. It's backlit. Like, I've got a MacBook, a brand new MacBook for work. I prefer this to the MacBook, hands down. It's pretty badass, and it's also like super affordable for what it is. It's like a $700 laptop or something, and pound for pound, like, processing for $1, I have never seen this good of a deal. So if anybody's in the market for a new laptop, check this one out. It's pretty sweet.
So mine is some classic aviation news that I just found out about. Relatively recently, the Flying Heritage and Combat Armor Museum near Seattle, which is partially or maybe fully owned by Paul Allen, co-founder of Microsoft. They have been restoring to flight worthiness an original Messerschmitt Me-262. That's the world's first operational jet aircraft, the first one to operate in a combat setting, in a work setting. And there are a few others that have been flying, and people have actually most of those are complete recreations. Every nut, bolt, every rib in the wing, those are all recreated from blueprints. But this one is completely original. Also, what's really wacky, the ones that have been flying that are reproductions are using modern jet engines. This one is going to use its original Jumo 004, 004 perhaps, German engine. I mean, we're talking extremely primitive by today's standards jet engine technology. These things, they basically ran on kerosene, and they were completely made of steel. Germany didn't have access to the hardened alloys needed to make a quality jet engine as we know it. But so for the past 14 years, they've been things like the fan blades. These engines, after about 20 hours of use, would have to be completely overhauled. And so they're using modern hardened alloys in the fan blades and a few other things like that, so that this frickin' 70 going on 80-year-old jet engine is going to make an aircraft fly. It's nuts, truly.
And this is all to fulfill Paul Allen's fantasy of being a captain in the Luftwaffe?
You know, that may be. I'm honestly, as much as I love classic aviation and like keeping them flying, you know what I mean? I don't actually think this thing should fly, personally. There are recreations that look the same. Fly them. Don't fly one of the last remaining, like, you know, original things. It also, you know, obviously it's contentious, and it's unfortunate that it is a freaking Nazi aircraft. But regardless, in terms of aviation history, it's a huge milestone. And I'm a little bit confused about why they're flying it, but they're gonna.
So can I summarize your thoughts on the use of this plane as it should be in a museum?
It should be in a museum! Exactly.
All right, guys, what do you say we stop this bullshit and start rolling some dice? This has been a production of Alien Familiar Media. You can find past episodes and more at alienfamiliar.com. You can email us at alienfamiliarmedia@gmail.com. This production is protected under a Creative Commons non-commercial attribution, no derivatives license. Music for this episode is Suburban Outlaw by Forget the Whale and can be found at freemusicarchive.org.